Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to talk about something that I think is really fun. I find it fun because we've all heard that anecdote of, I can't wait until my kids grow up so that they don't know everything anymore. This is a really great solution to that sort of growing up teenage issue of kind of wanting to run headlong into decisions without really thinking them through. Luckily, I was a pretty good teenager for my parents, but I do remember several times thinking that really bad ideas were really good ideas. And so today we're going to talk about structured problem-solving method that we call SODAS. And SODAS is actually a way that we help kids really to kind of drill down and define what the problem is and what specific options are for that problem, and some of the advantages and disadvantages of whatever their options might be before they make the decision for what the solution is going to be. So let's just quickly go through what happens when kids don't know how to solve problems. When typically our kids' brains are not all the way developed, and we all know that, right? They have a hard time making decisions because that part of their brain that reasons and thinks and is really mature and empathetic and takes everything into consideration, frankly, that part of their brain is still growing. It is kind of those growing opportunities, those learning experiences that help them become the responsible, mature adults that we want them to be, which means that they react without thinking, right? If a young driver gets cut off in traffic, they're more likely to get, road rage and throw their drink at the car and, do ridiculous things. If their friends are all jumping off a bridge, into a river, they're like, yeah, that seems like a really good idea. And they don't think, oh, there might be rocks and oh, I might be paralyzed. They just think, gosh, that looks fun. And then they do it. As adults, we know that those decisions should be thought through. Sometimes jumping off a bridge is a really good idea. Sometimes it will be really fun. And it's an adventure that you can remember for the rest of your life. Once you've kind of done the research to determine that it's safe, to determine, that you're not going to die if you do it. As adults, we kind of consider those things, and our kids just aren't there yet. So in our program, what we do is work with them to really think through these choices and decisions as they face problems every single day. Little ones like, do I study for a test or do I hang out with my friends? Do I get in a car with this friend that has questionable judgment, or do I stay here at school? And then bigger things like, do I take this job or do I take that job? All of those decisions, as minor and as large as they are, all require some kind of decision-making process. So SODAS is a way that we engage that decision-making process. I'm going to have you watch a short video about the steps of our problem-solving process called SODAS.
Hey, my name's Anthony. I'm a father of 2 girls. Sometimes being a parent is like being a detective. You have to really work at figuring out why your children make the decisions they do. Have you ever asked your child why they did something? I have. And most of the time they can't describe why, they don't want to, or they look at me like I'm an alien. Your child makes decisions all the time, but they may not realize it. For example, they know what clothes they want to wear, what they want to eat, and what they want to do. They are making decisions, even simple ones. Life is about decision making and solving problems large and small. The thing that has helped me and my children has been using a method called SODAS. Using SODAS will help your child solve problems and make better decisions, and that means it will be easier on you as a parent. SODAS is an acronym which makes it easy to remember. Your kids should love that. They speak acronym. S stands for situations, O for options, D for disadvantages, A for advantages, and the final S for solution. Let's go through each step and I'll give you an example. First, the situation. In order to resolve an issue, you have to identify the situation. It's important to describe the situation in detail. Be as specific as you can. For example, let's imagine your child came home and told you another kid in his class that he didn't like started to throw paper at him. You could write the situation like, I was in my English class with a kid that I don't like, and then he started to throw paper at me. After you have clarified the situation, move next to options. It's best to think of at least 3 options. In this example, your your child came up with the following 3 options. Number 1, throw the paper back at the kid. Number 2, tell the teacher what the kid is doing. Number 3, ignore him. It's that third option that seems to be a challenge for most kids to come up with. Always explore multiple options, even if it seems weird or silly to you, so your child knows they have choices. Using the 3 options from the previous step, begin writing down the disadvantages to each of those options. List as many disadvantages as you can for each one. In this example, your child may think that throwing the paper back might hit someone else and they won't like them. If the child tells the teacher, option number 2, a disadvantage might be he will be considered a tattletale. Once you have finished that, have your child do the same thing, but focus this time on the advantages of each option. In this example, your child may think an advantage to option number 1 is, it'll make him stop. Or an advantage to option number 3 is, I'll look cool because I don't care. It's always helpful to list as many advantages as possible. Now it's time to look through the entire worksheet. By choosing the best advantages and eliminating the worst disadvantages, your child will begin to narrow down the best option. Once your child figures out which option works best, they will come to a solution. In this example, the child decided to use options number 2 and 3 as a solution. Yes, your child may come to more than one solution. He will ignore him and tell the teacher if he does it again. Let's watch a whole family use this skill during a family meeting. They're trying to figure out what kind of pet they want to get.
Bueno familia, ahora que ya decidimos escoger una mascota, vamos a escoger cuál es la mejor para nosotros, ¿verdad? Y vamos a usar la técnica SODA para ver cuál es la mejor. Gracias Daniela.
Gracias.
Y con una sonrisa, me encanta eso.
Entonces, ¿cuál es la situación?
Nosotros vamos a coger una mascota.
Exactamente.
Oh, bueno, ahora vamos a ver cuáles son las mascotas que queremos y pensemos en 3 opciones.
Bueno, ya que hablamos de las ventajas y desventajas, ahora tenemos que usar esto para encontrar cuál es el mejor para nosotros. Y vamos a usar entre las buenas y las cosas malas de cada animal para decidir cuál es el que queremos. Bueno chicos, parece que el cocodrilo no nos ofrece muchas opciones buenas, que digamos, tanto como el gato o el perro, ¿verdad? Así que vamos a descartar el cocodrilo, mijo.
Está bien, papá.
Ok, gracias, mijo.
Ok, vamos a ver cuáles son las opciones que nos quedan. Ok, parece que el perro y el gato son los que más se parecen a lo que estamos buscando. Pero tu papá y yo habíamos pensado en el perro porque estábamos pensando en algo que les brindara protección.
Así es.
Y creo que les gustaría a ustedes tener algo con lo que puedan jugar. Creo que el perro es la mejor opción.
Entonces, ¿vamos a con un perro?
Parece que sí.
¡Yay!
Even though the correct solution may be obvious to you as a parent sometimes, the important part is that you're teaching your children how to make the best choices and involving them in the decision-making process. Let's watch a father with his teenage daughter use this skill to figure out how to resolve her problem of being late for curfew.
Hey Olivia, can you come in here for a second?
Why?
I want to talk to you.
What?
You came in after your curfew again last night.
I know.
Well, that's 3 times this month. Have a seat. Let's have a talk. Tell me what's going on.
I don't know. I was just with Amy at her house, and I guess I just lost track of time.
Well, it's looking like it's becoming a recurring problem, so let's use SODAS to figure it out.
Okay.
So which option do you think will work best?
Probably to set my alarm 15 minutes earlier so I won't be late.
Okay, I think that sounds good. So you feel comfortable and know what to do when the situation arises. Let's go practice.
Fine.
Everybody's talking. Hey. There you go. See you later.
Bye. Okay.
You
Oh,
get it.
I have to go.
Okay,
Bye.
see ya. Well, now we've practiced a few times. Hopefully it won't happen again.
Okay, are we done?
Yeah. Hey, wait, you still have the consequence of extra chores.
I know.
Okay.
Even though the daughter wasn't super excited about doing this, she still contributed and they came up with a solution that worked for the both of them. Here's an extra little tip. It's always helpful to practice your solution, just like this father and daughter did. By using SODAS, it helps your child know why you have made certain decisions instead of saying, because I said so, or because I'm the parent. With one of my girls, I was able to use the SODAS method when I couldn't figure out what to do to teach her to be more responsible. She would skip out on chores, leave the house without permission. I wanted to find a way to teach her that this behavior wasn't appropriate. We ended up using the SODAS method to weigh the advantages and the disadvantages of some of our options, and we came up with a solution that helped her make a change. It worked for me. How will you use the SODAS method in your family? Maybe you should do one right now to figure out when you can use it with your child.
Hopefully that did an adequate job of describing what the SODAS method is and how it can be used in real life. There are several reasons why we use all of these steps. Among my favorites is that kids don't want to argue against themselves. It really goes against the grain when you think, well, if the kid throws paper at me, I'm just going to throw it back without considering other options. So it's really helpful for their development and their developing brains if they're kind of forced to play that devil's advocate role, right? If they want something and they have to argue for the opposite, then it helps broaden their mind in terms of not only what other options are available, but what the possible advantages and disadvantages of those options might be. So let's move on a little bit and talk about the nuts and bolts of actually how you would sit down with a youth and complete a SODAS worksheet. Often we just do these verbally, but sometimes, as you saw in the video, it's really helpful if they're able to kind of cross out things that end up not making sense and then circle things that make more sense to them. It's that kind of visual component and being able to really think it through that helps when you put it down on paper. It's also really helpful some days when you're driving to soccer practice or headed home from school to just verbally kind of work this stuff out with them. It helps them really think it through in a productive way. So let's look at how we really work the problem. It's usually most helpful to have the youth describe the situation from their perspective, because as adults we have had more life experience. We kind of maybe are going to jump to what we think is the right solution without listening for what the child perceives the actual solution to be. So it sounds really easy, but don't be afraid to take some time to really kind of drill down on what the situation is and also the exact same thing with the possible options. It's helpful for them if you ask specific questions that kind of will open their mind to other options, to a different perspective, maybe a different way to think about the situation. So be specific and descriptive when you're asking them questions about whatever the situation is. Really being careful to use that observing and describing language that we've been talking about and avoid any judgmental statements. It can be difficult, especially when the child's situation has to do with like rule breaking or even law abiding kinds of things. If they're 15 and they're trying to decide whether or not they want to smoke or not. We might have all kinds of judgments about that, right? But it's important, especially because we want them to own this decision-making process, that we kind of avoid that judgment in that moment. Also, helping them to brainstorm, that you work together to brainstorm options, it can be really helpful. I've worked with several youth who, once they decide or think that this is how a situation is going to go, it's not that they won't, they really can't think of any other way that this situation could go. You know, there's a girl I like at school and I really want to ask her out, but I'm 100% sure she's going to shut me down. And then I'll be a fool and people will make fun of me and and that's the only way. Like, they have this tunnel vision as far as what they believe the situation, the options and the outcome is going to be. So your guidance in that can be really helpful in making them think outside kind of that teenage black and white thinking box. And not even just for teenagers, but younger children think very much the same way. It's most helpful if they come up with 3 options. As was mentioned in the video, it's usually that third option that's the hardest to come up with, but also can often end up being the best solution as you sort of talk it out and work through it. So kind of push for that third option. If it's not available, it's not available, but be creative in thinking about what the third option could be. I think in the demonstration video, one of the options was, well, we could get an alligator or a crocodile. And of course, that was funny and fun and got the kids engaged. It wasn't a realistic option, but it was also engaging and fun to talk about for the family. So don't be afraid to push for something a little bit silly if the situation warrants it. So finally, you'll summarize the options back to the youth so that they can kind of hear what they've been saying. An example of this would be, let's say you do have a young person in your home that thinks smoking is awesome and really wants to do it. But when you say, so smoking makes you look really cool and it makes people like you, right? Somehow, when it comes out of their mouths, it makes sense, but when they hear it back, it may not make as much sense. So kind of reviewing back to them or copying back to them the things that they have said, again, sort of tweaks that perspective a little bit and helps them see things from a different light. They will not want to argue against the option that they think is best in the beginning. And they won't want to argue for the option that is the opposite of the one that they want, right? So that practice in helping them do that back and forth is really helpful. So for every option, they have to think of some disadvantages and they have to think of some solutions. It's just part of the process. So really encourage them to do that, work with them to do that. And then as things don't make sense, use that practice of kind of Xing out those things that don't make sense to your youth. You can help a child move through this entire process, and the option that they pick is not the one that you would advocate. And it is our responsibility to explain some of the negative outcomes of that, but if it doesn't involve them breaking the law or breaking a significant rule, it's one of those situations where honestly, I would allow them to let those natural consequences kind of follow. The young man we talked about who was going to ask somebody out on a date, if in the end he decided not to do that because he was just too afraid of potential humiliation, then a natural consequence of that might be that he doesn't get to go to the dance with that young lady and he's missed that opportunity. And hopefully that can also be a learning experience for him. We really want them to be making these life choices for themselves, whether it's a tiny little elementary school kid deciding whether he wants, a bike or a big wheel, or if it's a grown-up high school kid deciding where he wants his first job to be. We want these young people to start really thinking about the pros and cons of any decision that they might make. At the conclusion of this class, there are several things that you're going to learn about here through these videos that you will also be practicing with your consultant, and you'll be going through role plays. This screen is an example of a potential role play that you will engage in with your consultant. But I would also encourage you to think of other situations with youth or with children that you know, or situations that you were in as a teenager that you could have practiced this with, and ways that it could have helped you potentially make better decisions. Using the SODAS method is something that does require a lot of practice. It takes time to get really good at it. It takes more time to withhold your judgment when you're talking to a youth about it. We love the kids that we work with and we want the best for them, and oftentimes we want to jump in and make those decisions for them. We know that they will have happier, more fulfilled lives if they are allowed to make some mistakes, but also if they're really allowed to think through the choices that they make and come up with the options that are best for them. This is this same worksheet that you saw on the video. It's also available in the back of your training book. I would encourage you to use it when you're working through your role play examples. And in addition to that, they're available on oursmarterparenting.com. There are tons and tons and tons of resources for use with your youth on that website. I hope to see you next time. More fun to come.